If you left the Missouri bandwagon, hop back on because the train is back on the tracks.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And what a huge victory for Missouri tonight. Didn't want to go into March Madness with a bad taste in your mouth, did you, whatsoever? And speaking of which, where do we think Missouri's going to be seated? And of course, got to talk about Mark Mitchell's potential injury situation as well. I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. And 85-73, Missouri wins it. And I tell you, you know who deserves a lot of credit down the stretch, in my opinion? Obviously, Tony Perkins was excellent tonight. Felt like Tamar Bates got it going again. Well, I tell you, Aidan Shaw, I think, deserves a ton of credit. A guy who came in with Josh Gray cramping up at one point. Mark Mitchell obviously sat out the entire second half. I'll get to that more here in just a little bit. But I thought Aidan Shaw's defense was just outstanding for the most part. I really did. And even offensively, well, he wasn't perfect, obviously, but Shaw did what he needed to do, I thought, for the most part. Again, great dunk finish by Shaw in that ball game. But, of course, Tony Perkins, I thought, was the player of the game for sure. Just some strong drives and a steady presence in the second half that Missouri really needed after the Tigers and Perkins himself had just been, well, throwing the ball away far too much. Just way too many giveaways and lazy passes and just, being a little bit off kilter at times was Missouri. But regardless, that was a much-needed victory for Missouri. Well, the last thing in the world you wanted was 4 losses in a row for a team that had been feeling really confident, I think, up until that point. So it just felt like the confidence had come back. Heck, even Dennis Gates and Tony Perkins in the postgame threw up the shush signal. So the vibes are back, baby. That's all I can really say. And by the way, Gabe DeArmond over at Power Mizzou postgame tweeted out he thinks this will keep Missouri on the 6 line. In other words, as a 6 seed or better in the tournament. And if he's right, boy, that would be really nice because I personally, for the most part, I don't consider anything, say the 8-9 game, the 7-10 games in the tournament. Usually I don't consider a 10 beating a 7 much of an upset. And I think the Vegas and FanDuel Sportsbook lines will typically back me up there. So I do think it's important, not only just for confidence purposes this game, but I do think this was an important game for seeding as well. And for as much as people have correctly pointed out that the NCAA committee is not quite as gung-ho to move you up seeding lines for a run in the tournament anymore. This is more really about solidifying, I think, where Missouri more or less deserves to be anyway. If you look at the advanced statistics, in fact, Ken Pom being one of them, of course, Missouri actually headed up a few spots to 17th in the country over at Ken Pom. So that tells me that even a 5 seed is not out of the question for the Missouri Tigers, especially, well, with a good performance or even a victory against Florida tomorrow. Lord knows the Tigers have done it before. They finally won a rematch for the first time this season. Maybe they can get a streak going with rematches as well. But of course, the big question on the negative side of this whole equation is just how bad is Mark Mitchell's injury? ESPN, SEC Network, I suppose, Molly McGrath told us early in the second half that Mark Mitchell had a knee injury and would not return in the basketball game. Now, I'm keeping an eye on my Twitter feed here to see Dennis Gates, his comments post-game, see if he gives us any insight whatsoever. on Mitchell's injury, I'm assuming we won't get a ton of color from Gates on this, other than I'm assuming he's going to probably say it's a long shot that he's going to play tomorrow, much like Cooper Flagg for Duke, who turned his ankle earlier in the day. At the same time, again, with less than 24 hours until Missouri tips off against Florida tomorrow at 6 p.m. in Nashville, 6 p.m. our time, by the way. At the same time, this injury him sitting out in the second half, looking at it did seem precautionary. Nothing was wrapped as far as the knee goes. He was in uniform, by the way, and standing around and walking around on it without any obvious signs of discomfort. So hopefully Mark Mitchell will be back for the NCAA tournament. At this point, if he's going to sit out the second half of this ball game today, I'd say it probably makes a lot of sense for him to sit out tomorrow at the very least, and I'd say his tournament is probably finished at this point. But I'm still keeping hope alive at this moment, at the very least, that Mitchell can play next Thursday or Friday, wherever Missouri gets slotted. And it's too bad we're having to talk about this instead of his fresh new haircut. Honestly, was I the only one who, just from a distance, thought that Mark Mitchell kind of looked like TJ Soyoye from back in the day? I think it was the elbow pad more than anything. The thing is, basketball is such a rhythm game. It's such a confidence game that it just felt like over the last 2.5 weeks or so that Missouri had been thrown off of its rhythm a little bit. And yet tonight, while not everything was perfect, of course, that was an excellent win for Missouri against a very good Mississippi State team. And I think the rest of the league and the rest of the country, especially if Missouri can win tomorrow or even just play a really competitive game against one of the elite teams in the country in the Florida Gators, I think the rest of the country is really going to take notice and go, dang it, I thought Missouri was hitting the skids. Because let's say Missouri does end up as a 6 seed, for example. Well, if the high seeds hold, if chalk remains, there's no major upsets, at least in that quadrant of the bracket, well, that means that a 3 seed would play 6-seeded Missouri in the second round. That's not exactly a great reward for a team that's had, a 3 seed. You've had an excellent season. So I have to play Mizzou, who is one of the elite offensive teams in the entire country. We're talking 5th in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency. Yeah, we can score. We get to the line over and over and over again. And by the way, even though Missouri's defense has definitely been lagging and lacking the last few weeks, well, it's not as though Missouri is tiny or lacking physicality or something like that. I think when Missouri completely locks in and has a good defensive game plan, as I thought they did twice really against Mississippi State, this is not a bad defensive team per se. Really, maybe the biggest problem for Missouri defensively is just defending without fouling. When Missouri was able to keep Josh Hubbard and the rest of the Mississippi State Bulldogs off of the free throw line, it just felt like a much easier task for Missouri. Unfortunately, well, the Tigers have put their opposition on the free throw line entirely too much in recent weeks. And I'll tell you this, one thing, I think there's a real underrated variable in March Madness, and you know what it is? It's the whistle. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm getting at here coming up in just a little bit. And also, Dennis Gates thinks 14 teams from the SEC should be in the tournament. Is he completely off his rocker? I'll tell you in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about Monarch Money, because have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. Track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Easy collaboration as well. You can manage your money with your partner. smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And eating healthy does not have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. And Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, with more than 40 options across 8 dietary preferences. We're talking Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto. They've got everything you could possibly want, including smoothies, breakfasts, snacks, so you always have something nutritious and ready to go. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. And as much as I love Dennis Gates, there is one thing I definitely disagree with him about. He wants to expand the NCAA tournament. I'm not interested. That's a non-starter for me. But so when Dennis Gates said after the game that he thinks 14 teams from the SEC should be in the big dance, I have to say at first glance, I just thought, Dennis Gates, he just loves his big numbers, doesn't he? Wants more teams in the tournament. He says his team is 18 strong. But I have to say, when I looked at it, Texas is definitely making a case for a 14th team in the big dance, at the very least. Yes, 6-12 in the league is not going to blow anybody away, but a couple more wins for Texas, beating Vanderbilt in the first round, and of course taking down arch rival Texas A&M in double overtime as well. Frankly, if the Longhorns can pull off a victory against Tennessee after that double overtime affair today, well, that would be truly stunning. And if they can pull that off, I think I probably would put them in the field, quite possibly. Again, without actually looking at all the other options. I'm really just kind of talking off the top of my head here. But I will say this, and this is based on more of just recent history here. I think it would be, well, maybe a little bit appropriate, ironic, whatever the right phrase here is in this particular case. But Texas just beat Texas A&M. Well, who had a big run in the SEC tournament last year? It was Texas A&M. And yet the Aggies were left out of the field of 68 anyway. Or wait, that was 2 years ago. Yes, 2023. Right? Right? See, now I'm looking at this and I'm going, wait, 24, NCAA tournament, 9 seed. What year am I thinking of? Was it 2022? Yes, 2022. There we go. I knew I'd get there eventually. Texas A&M, number 1 seed in the NIT that year. So despite making it all the way to the finals that year, 1-3, lost to Tennessee ultimately, wasn't good enough. So my point here, a long way to get to, I don't think Texas is going to actually get in. There's your prediction. Dennis Gates doing a nice job of lobbying for his conference. I don't think they're going to go quite that far. 12, I think, is a sure thing. I think they're going to get 13. So in your opinion, what was more frustrating tonight? Was it just the generally inexplicable officiating going both ways, to be brutally honest? But boy, Missouri probably got the worst of it, it felt like. Easy for a Tiger fan to say. But I'll tell you this, Josh Hubbard, holy cow, just with some incredible kicks, kicking his leg out every single three-point shot. And just the hook and hold champion, maybe of all time. And Jimmy Dykes, by the way, the color announcer, just slurping the guy the entire game, despite the fact that he went 3 of 14 from 3. Once again, I thought Missouri had a very good plan against Hubbard. He just wasn't nearly as good in this game as he was in Mississippi State. And by the way, the first hook and the hold, okay, honestly, Anthony Robinson, it did look like Hubbard kind of grabbed his arm and pulled him down there, but 70 feet from the basket or something, very, very early in the ball game. That's just one where Anthony's got to be a little bit smarter. And the reason I say that is because, well, obviously he picks up a second foul quickly 3 minutes into the ball game as well, sits out most of the first half. But at the end of the second half, you see what happens when Robinson is out there. He's a real difference maker. When he's playing well, when he's got this a little bit of a little edge to Anthony, when he's just slapping and yelling and just, energized, there's something about that for him. How he needs to get into that mindset, well, that'll be up to him. But I do think there is something to be said for Robinson. Just, get him a little fired up or something. I don't know what it is, but at the same time, again, that's the balance, because sometimes he gets a little too aggressive. And that's the thing. Once Robinson finds that balance, I think he's going to be an all-SEC type of player. I think he's just that good, and he's definitely that important for this particular Missouri team. And, of course, I, like many sports fans, especially during the game, can be prone to hyperbole. Stuff like, oh, my God, that's the worst call I've ever seen in my entire life. Well, when I really step back and objectively think about it, the Josh Hubbard hook and hold on Jacob Cruz, when Hubbard had basically grabbed with his off arm, he's dribbling with his right hand, I believe, and then with his left arm, just kind of hooks Jacob Cruz's arm and just keeps dribbling on it for probably a good 5 or 6 feet, to the point where Cruz, when you watch the replay, seems like he's in a decent bit of discomfort there for a second, and is also just incredulous as well. He's going, blow the whistle, hello, he's grabbing my arm, and it would be bad enough if they'd missed that in real time. But in fact, no, we have to stop the game and look at this for 3 minutes and still miss it. I mean, really, if it was just an initial hook and hold, but no, he hooks and holds and rides him like a bucking bronco for about 6 feet or something like that. And the officials were like, not good enough. Somehow, these hook and hold things, it's not my favorite rule, by the way, but if it's in the rule book, I don't know how much more blatant of an example you could have than that. In a night of just really, really bad officiating, that one definitely took the cake. And while Missouri as a team, I thought got back on track, obviously broke their losing streak, well, unfortunately, Caleb Grill has not gotten back on track. Certainly not in this ball game. Just 2 field goals made by Grill on 11 attempts in the ball game. So let's talk about Caleb and how he needs to get going coming up here in the tournament for Missouri if they have any chance to make a run, quite obviously. But before we get there, this message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and worrying and wondering some more. Well, now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who will find every deductible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No more waiting, worrying, or any of that other stuff. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates, only an iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So there was a split second in that ball game today where I kind of got mad at Tamar Bates because he tried to drive through 2 Mississippi State defenders at the rim instead of kicking it out to his right to a wide-open Caleb Grill in the corner for a three-pointer. But as soon as he did that, I had to correct myself because it's not as though Bates had driven at their best rim protectors, and indeed, Bates drew 2 free throw attempts. He got fouled on the attempt. So Bates being a 93% free throw shooter, I had to go, Actually, you know what? Good move, Tamar. That actually was the correct decision there, just statistically and feel and everything else. But the reason I had that initial instinct is because I wanted Caleb Grill to get an easier shot. I didn't love, I have to admit, I didn't love that the first shot Caleb Grill took was a quick, pretty contested three-pointer that from the left wing that, again, wasn't particularly open. I didn't even think he was like in the greatest rhythm I'd ever seen either. Don't get me wrong, it was a clean catch, but just because you catch the ball clean and a defender is not in your pocket, I don't think Caleb just has to immediately shoot that, especially when he hasn't found his rhythm yet. How could he have? He just checked in to the ball game. But to me, if you're Caleb Grill and if you're in a little bit of a shooting funk here, I just think find yourself some easier shots. And then once you get it going, by all means, take the quick ones, take the heat checks, take the unconscious ones. I'm not trying to rein him in too hard, but I do think that Caleb just looks like he's pressing a little bit right now to me. And to the opposite end of the spectrum, I think once he misses the first two or three, then he starts hesitating on shots that maybe he shouldn't too. I saw that at least once in the game today, in my opinion. But I still have confidence in Grill. I really do. So I'm not trying to be like, well, Caleb Grill, he's not any good anymore. Obviously, that's not the case that I'm making whatsoever. I'm certainly not trying to tell Caleb not to shoot. I'm just simply saying, especially early in the ball game, before you've seen the ball go into the basket with a free throw, a dunk, a layup, anything like that, maybe take the Steph Curry stuff down a slight notch. And still no Mark Mitchell updates from what I've seen here at about 10:20 on Thursday evening. But I do want to pay something off. I think I teased something that I didn't pay off earlier. My mistake on that one. I was saying how the March Madness whistle is a much bigger variable than I think people realize. And here's what I really think about it. This is something I've noticed for years, especially going back, well, really starting, I'd say, all the way back to the Kelvin Sampson era of Oklahoma basketball when Eduardo Nahara, for example, that was just a physical Oklahoma team. And really that entire league just felt incredibly physical and just a lack of fouls being called, especially when compared to the NCAA tournament. It was very noticeable that these in-conference games, I think once you get to the neutral courts in March, I think it starts to tighten up quite a bit. So Anthony Robinson, I'm especially looking at you. Josh Gray, I'm also looking at you. But of course I'm looking at the entire team. This Missouri has to be able to defend without fouling. So here's the thing. Dennis Gates, I think, agrees with me too. He recently just said, quote, "We got to adjust in-game based off what officials are assigned to the contest. We have a sense of the officials and how they blow the whistle. But this is going to be postseason play. Last year, NCAA tournament, our teams got in foul trouble in the NCAA tournament. By our teams, I think he means the SEC there, obviously. We as a conference have to clean that up. So you may see it being cleaned up this postseason, and we have to continue to get better to give ourselves a chance to succeed." So I guess I'm not crazy. I guess all these years ago I did notice something that, yes, conference play a lot more physical than the NCAA tournament. The teams that adjust to that the most quickly will be a lot better off, especially that first round. That's where you can get caught. Get a couple fouls by an important player early in the game. That can be all the difference in the world right there. So, as usual, Dennis Gates, you're a genius, especially when you agree with me. And with all that being said, thanks for joining me here on the podcast, and I will see you tomorrow after the Florida game. Until then, I'm John Miller. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.